Earlier today, I sat down with Seattle area Congressman Adam Smith to hear his thoughts on what's been happening so far in Iran and across the globe. Adam Smith represents Washington's 9th congressional district, and he's the top Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee. Hi, Adam. Thanks for being here.
Well, thanks, Libby. It's always a pleasure to have the opportunity to talk to you. Thanks for giving me the chance.
And, of course, when you come on the show, I make a point to say 15 years ago now, in 2011, I worked in your office. Adam, Axios reported that Israel gave its U.S. counterparts a heads up about those fuel depot strikes, but those attacks ended up being a lot more widespread than the U.S. anticipated. Crude oil prices jumped immediately after those images started going out of the oil infrastructure on fire, storm drains in Tehran shooting flames. President Trump said Sunday afternoon that, quote, short-term oil price hikes are a very small price to pay for USA and world safety and peace. Only fools would think differently. You and I haven't talked since this all started, so I guess I want to ask first, what do you think of this latest news?
Sure. Look, I strongly disagree with the president. The cost of this conflict is enormous. And this is something we've been talking about, I think, for 10, 15 years. There are things that Iran has been doing that we're concerned about. They support terrorist organizations. They were instrumental in destabilizing Lebanon and Iraq. They have a massive ballistic missile program. Death to Israel, death to America is sort of like their founding principle. So there's no question they're a problem. So we're trying to figure out, how do you deal with it? And on the Armed Services Committee, we've had these conversations. And what every other sensible person concluded was the military solutions were incredibly costly, first of all, in ways that I'll outline in just a moment. But second of all, their ability to achieve the benefits were highly suspect. So think about this way. You've got, okay, what's the benefits? What are we trying to accomplish versus the costs? And I just want to walk through that. What President Trump is trying to do now, he is not overwhelmingly thoughtful about it. Let's just put it that way. He tends to lash out. And I want to make sure people understand that a huge part of this is connected to everything else that Trump is doing, which is basically to consolidate as much power in his hands as possible so that he can exercise it whenever he feels like it without anyone checking him. That's a huge part of this. It's part of why he snatched Maduro. It's part of why he's doing the boat strikes. It's why, he's done what he's done with ICE and his paramilitary force in Minneapolis and elsewhere, suing law firms, suing media. It is to consolidate power so that he can exercise that power in an unchecked way. And he just keeps growing. It just keeps going. And now he has started a full-scale war in the Middle East. But putting that aside for the moment, people say, what's he doing? What's the objective? Well, the objective from a military standpoint has sort of like 3 layers to it. Number one, they want to degrade Iran's ability to support those terrorist organizations and to have military capacity, which is primarily drones and ballistic missiles. So the bombing campaign targets their missiles, targets their launchers, targets the drones. Crucially, they also want to target the defense industrial base that enables them to build them. Because part of the problem here, and part of the reason that we, sensible people, had concluded a long time ago that this wasn't a smart thing to do, was it's really not that hard to rebuild that stuff. Which seems a little weird to me. I have no engineering background. It seems to me like making missiles would be harder than it is. But you can look at the Houthis in Yemen. Everyone forgets now we waged a 3.5-month war against the Houthis a year ago. But then we blew up a lot of stuff. But they rebuilt it. They reconstituted it. It came back. So that's one goal. The second goal that is in Trump's mind is whoever winds up running Iran when this is done, he wants them to be bent to his will. That's sort of we keep hearing about the Venezuela model and what he supposedly has accomplished down there. We'll see if that actually pans out. But it's certainly not going to pan out in Iran. We saw it. They killed the father. They put the son in place. This regime is defiant, not compliant. So the ability to achieve that goal is also seriously in question. And the third goal would be replace the regime outright. And get a legitimate regime in place. Now, and that's a goal that every person should kind of aspire to. And I will tell you, but not with the military as the way to achieve it. Let me emphasize that point. I've got a number of Iranian Americans in my district who have been coming at me for a couple of years now saying, do this. And I have been resisting that for all the reasons that I'm outlining here. But the biggest one is not really achievable. Iran's regime is dug in and layered upon layer upon layer. They control the guns. They've got a 1 million person militia that enforces their rules. So none of those three things that I just outlined are achievable militarily. What can we achieve? We can set them back a little bit, okay? And then they reconstitute, which, okay, but at what cost? And you mentioned some of the costs of that. You have civilians dying, being terrified across the region. I think we're up to 14 different countries now that in one way or another have been dragged into this conflict. The entire Middle East is completely disrupted, a major economic hub, certainly for oil. We focus on the oil. We see the price oil going up. Again, predictable, not just predictable, guaranteed if this happened. All right, but then just the whole economy. You've got, apparently the Middle East is also an important source of fertilizer, which literally means that people are going to starve in Africa and grocery prices are going to go up significantly because of this war. An enormous, enormous cost. And you're not going to be able to achieve the benefit. But, Trump doesn't think in a linear manner. He's like, I want it, I'm going to get it, let's go. But as I said, I've sat in these briefs for 15 years, all right? And I've seen what is achievable and what is not achievable. It's not achievable militarily simply to come in there and replace the regime. And now the question is, how emboldened is Trump? Because clearly he's not going to achieve any of his objectives in the current path. Does he up the ante? Does he send in troops? A month ago, I would have said, no, I don't think he'll do that. Today, the possibility terrifies me. And I think it is distinctly possible given Trump's authoritarian, autocratic mindset at this point.
You mentioned Ali Khamenei's son being named the new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei. This was the IRGC's, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard's preferred candidate. He is assumed to be a hardliner, although we haven't heard from him really much at all over the years. His son, Mojtaba Khamenei's son, his wife, his mother, and of course his father was just killed by Israeli strikes with U.S. support. Unless this new Khamenei surprises everyone, Iran is not offering up a Delcy Rodriguez-type Venezuela-compliant leader. I'm hearing you say the Islamic Republic has staying power, that your assessment of these briefings over the years are that this is not achievable. So what is a likelier outcome? The conflict has already widened, as you've outlined. State collapse of Iran, a la Libya or Syria, civil war, balkanization. What do you expect to happen?
Well, first of all, we should stop this war right now and shift to trying to contain the problem. And, I don't think it likely that Iran's going to collapse in the way Libya did because of how solid the Iranian regime is compared to Libya's. Now, if the regime did collapse, that would be the third problem. Let's say that I'm wrong, and let's say that we degrade all their stuff, the regime collapses. Then you get to the final piece of this. Okay, but what replaces it? And you do have a massive divide amongst Iranians who oppose the regime. You got various different ethnic groups. You have supporters of the Shah's son. Those are the people I've been meeting with in my district. You got others. So quite possibly at that point, if you got to that point, a Libya-like scenario might, or a Syria-like scenario might play out. I don't think we're going to get to that point. I don't think we get there. But what we need to do in the short term is stop the war. And this is really, really a crucial point as well, because I've had these conversations a lot in the last month, and people inevitably say to me, oh, so you're okay with what Iran is doing? You think it's fine and we shouldn't do anything about it. And I said, well, there should be a bit of a gap with, no, I'm not okay with it. And if you're not okay with it, therefore you have to start a full-scale, massive Middle East war in order to deal with it. And it was interesting. We had a vote last week on a resolution recognizing Iran as the primary state sponsor of terror. And it listed 6 or 7 terrible things that Iran had done. I voted for it. They're all true. They are. Okay. But just because they're true doesn't mean that you have to go to war to try and solve the problem. And something else that I think we humans need to get a little more comfortable with is you don't always get the ideal outcome. Some problems cannot be solved, no matter how, forceful you are, no matter how willing you are to do whatever it takes. Some problems have to be contained because you're going to struggle mightily to solve them no matter what you do. And an extreme violent reaction simply makes things worse. And I think Iran is in that category. We should try to contain all of those threats, but not imagine that we can launch some massive war that's going to solve them. So that's where I think we stumbled into this. Now there's two possible outcomes at this point. One is what I just said. Oh my God, this went exactly how everyone told us it was going to go. Let's stop and try to shift back to a containment strategy. And the sooner that happens, the better the world is going to be. So I'm going to be advocating as strongly as I can, day in and day out, stop the war, and let's start working on a containment strategy that will be vastly less damaging. The other alternative is the more likely one, sadly, at this point, is Trump doubles and triples down, keeps bombing, keeps the campaign going, again, contemplates troops. And in that scenario, the chaos simply spreads. The damage spreads, more people die, the economy suffers more problems, we have higher gas prices, higher food prices, and this simply goes on for a while the Iranian regime clings to power under that bombardment. Those, I think, are the two options. And there's going to people on the other side with, no, if we do that, then Iran will collapse and it'll work and everything will be fine. I have been wrong many, many times in my life. It's just part of being human, and I may well be wrong this time. But I'm giving you my honest opinion. I don't think that's what happens. If we keep pressing this war, the damage spreads, and we do not accomplish any of those objectives that Trump says we had when we started it.
I mean, he's talking on Truth Social, at least in pretty long-term terms. Like, he's saying that, Iran is going to have to surrender or more likely completely collapse. I mean, he's talking about world peace and all the trade-offs of the high gas prices and everything else that we mentioned previously. So it doesn't sound like he is in for we've wipe our hands, we've accomplished something here, we walk away. Like, this sounds like we are dug in here for the long term. Can we talk a little bit about that War Powers resolution?
Sure.
You voted last week in favor of the War Powers resolution in the House, which attempted to rein in the president's use of the armed forces in Iran without congressional approval. Now, that was largely symbolic because it was not going to survive a veto. Similar measure failed in the Senate. Marco Rubio said, no president, Republican or Democrat, has accepted these constraints before, that, they needed to, be waiting for Congress's approval for action in the Middle East. Obviously, Trump has used military force in the Middle East. President Obama used military force in Libya, Yemen, Syria, and more.
There's two things about that.
Yeah, tell me why congressional approval is needed now.
Number one, this vote was the best way to stop a stupid war. Okay. Now you can argue about the legalities and should Congress have had to do this and who did what 25 years ago. Congress going on record saying this is dumb, please stop, would have been helpful in stopping this. So therefore, it was really important that people get on the record and vote and try and stop that war. Second of all, Marco Rubio is not wrong in the sense that the way our country has played out and the way the Constitution has played out, the power of the executive branch to basically take unilateral action versus the confusion of 535 people trying to figure out how to check that has basically played out as you described. The president gets to use the military as he sees fit. I'd say he or she, but we haven't quite gotten there yet. But there was always also an implicit contract in that from every other president we've had before. And you saw this, even with George W. Bush, even as ill-advised as some of his military adventures were, he came to Congress, okay? And he came to the American people, and he made the case for his conflict. Barack Obama came to the American people, went to the United Nations, went to NATO, got broader support. The implicit contract was, yes, I have this power. I will not use it like a moron, and I will not use it in a way that completely ignores everybody else on the planet. That has also been an implicit part of this. All of these other conflicts that we've talked about, there has been an effort to bring the people along, an effort to bring Congress along and international bodies along, and also the overwhelming majority of those have been very limited in scope. Libya was just Libya, Panama was just Panama, Grenada was just Grenada. President Trump is the first one to do a full-scale military war involving 14 countries, a massive, largest conflict that has been started by a president of any of those that you list without any effort whatsoever to get support from anybody else at all. To me, that makes it different.
The Pentagon leadership right now, different than previous Pentagon leaders, certainly in their approach and style. Pete Hegseth in front of reporters who are apparently welcomed back to the briefing after they were kicked out, most of them. He's been bellicose. He's been, belligerent. He has been, making the case that this is not a regime change, but, maybe it is. And it's kind of been a, confusing, shifting rationale. The Department of War, or Department of Defense's social media accounts, meanwhile, have been posting memes about this war, like anime and video game. Yes. So can you just tell me what you think this says about the leadership of the Pentagon right now?
Two big points I want to make here before we run out of time. One, what Secretary Hegseth, President Trump have done is basically, again, and this is all about, I'll go ahead, I've said authoritarian, autocratic. Fascist is really the word that applies. And part of that is that a fascist regime exercises violence in whatever way they want and takes a certain amount of enthusiasm and pride in that. And you've seen that in what Secretary Hegseth has said. No rules of engagement. I forget that whole stupid little thing he went through about no woke wars. Basically we want to kill who we want to kill, when we want to kill them, and how we want to kill them, and you're all just going to have to eat it. That is a substantial undermining of a constitutional republic, to give the executive that level of power. We saw it in Minneapolis. We've seen it in the way ICE has done it in a whole bunch of different places. And we don't yet have the details on that girls' school that was hit and killed 175 people. But that is part of the consequences of not giving a damn about civilian casualties, and acting like you can exercise violence in whatever way you want. That is part of being a fascist. That is part of being an autocrat. And that rhetoric has translated directly into actions, and we should all be appalled by those actions. And the second point that I wanted to get to before we run out of time here is, remember, we supposedly had learned our lesson over the course of the last 30 years. And look, as I alluded to when talking about that resolution condemning Iran, I've been there. Muammar Gaddafi, Saddam Hussein, Taliban. These are terrible, awful, horrible people. And you make that case, and then you're like, it is so seductive to think that you can fix that problem just by flexing your muscles, basically, by using your might. Hey, you know what? We're not going to put up with this bullshit anymore. We're going to go fix this. We're going to, and what we should have learned after our brief little hubristic moment in the post-Cold War world, when we thought whatever needs to be done, we're the world's sole remaining superpower, we can go ahead and do it, is, ooh, no, actually, it's a little bit more difficult, complicated than that. And do you know who spoke more? Well, sorry, I almost said eloquently, and you'll understand why that would have been a terrible word to choose. Who spoke more forcefully that he had learned that lesson? Donald Trump on the campaign trail. No more stupid wars. I'm not going to do this stuff. But I really want people to understand what he was saying, because he said over and over again, you can find the tape, election condemning Iran. I've been there. Muammar Gaddafi, Saddam Hussein, Taliban. These are terrible, awful, horrible people. And you make that case, and then you're like, it is so seductive to think that you can fix that problem just by flexing your muscles, basically, by using your might. Hey, you know what? We're not going to put up with this bullshit anymore. We're going to go fix this. We're going to, and what we should have learned after our brief little hubristic moment in the post-Cold War world, when we thought whatever needs to be done, we're the world's sole remaining superpower, we can go ahead and do it, is, ooh, no, actually, it's a little bit more difficult, complicated than that. And do you know who spoke more? Well, sorry, I almost said eloquently, and you'll understand why that would have been a terrible word to choose. Who spoke more forcefully that he had learned that lesson? Donald Trump on the campaign trail. No more stupid wars. I'm not going to do this stuff. But I really want people to understand what he was saying, because he said over and over again, you can find the tape, elect me president, there will be no war in Iran. Specific. Not just no World War III and all the other stupid crap he said, but specifically, no war in Iran. Well, what do you mean by that? What he meant was he's just so powerful and so good at everything. He's the ultimate deal maker. It'll never happen on my watch. And the number of people who have bought into that crap that he said over and over again, he said the same thing. He's going to solve the war in Ukraine on day one. Inflation will go away. Healthcare will be magically affordable for everybody. It's just the ultimate con man's play. And I really think we need to emphasize the fact he was wrong. Okay? No, the war started. The war started. You were vastly weaker than you claimed to be. So let's stop buying in to the all-powerful, I alone can fix it, egotistical emperor with no clothes bullshit, and recognize he's not capable. He's just a con man. And we need to stop believing him as he consolidates more and more power in his hands at the expense of our constitutional republic.
Last question for you, Congressman. Are Americans safer today than when the U.S. and Israel started these attacks on Iran?
Good God, no. Okay. I mean, we are fleeing embassy after embassy. Tens of thousands of Americans had to flee the entire Middle East. Something blew up at our embassy in Oslo yesterday. Someone lobbed a pipe bomb at Mayor Mandami's house in New York. Threats have spread across the world. No, I mean, I do not like to be an alarmist, but there is no question that Americans are less safe now. Since this war started, we are the targets all across the world of responses to this war. And certainly, we've also had massive disruptions now to the economy, the very issue that Trump was supposed to focus on. And, when you talk about inflation and economic growth, it's not always easy to see the connection between policies. Presidents take credit when things go well and shift blame when they don't. But how much does the president really control these things? Donald Trump's specific policy choices have specifically driven up prices for Americans. Starting this war in Iran was a choice. It was a terrible choice, a choice that's going to have terrible, terrible consequences, already has. And it was a choice that is devastating to our economy and driving up prices, precisely what Donald Trump said he would not do.
Congressman Adam Smith of the 9th District, including Bellevue, Renton, thank you very much for being here, and I hope we can talk again soon because there's certain to be more to unpack.
Absolutely. Thank you, Libby. I really appreciate the chance.